There we go. Be live in a minute, and then we can get started. Mute the phone. Pull it out. Got to have all the accoutrements, you see.
Oh, I love that word, accoutrement.
It's a good word, isn't it?
It is.
I like that word.
It's delicious.
It is. It has flavor. It has bulk. It has substance. All right, let's get started in about 20 seconds. Oh, I gotta get this up too. Here we go. I gotta reset this too. So don't want to deafen the listeners. We'll try to avoid that. All right, here we go. Welcome to LOA Today. I'm Walt here with Louis D'Souza. Today is Monday, July the 8th, 2019. It is 8 a.m. in New York, 5 a.m. in Los Angeles, 1 p.m. in London. That makes it 10 p.m. in Sydney and 9 p.m. in Tokyo. And I'm running out of time slots to be able to fill in with my memory. But wherever you are in the world, thank you for joining us for another episode of LOA Today, your daily dose of happy. And I'm happy that we're getting our week started with another daily dose, because that's how I get my week started. That's how I get myself juiced up, Louis. That's how I get the energy going, just by doing these shows. And it works. It's like, it's effective. Every single Monday we get going. It's like, oh yeah, I'm ready for the week now. Let's go.
It's great. I was just telling you, Walt, welcome to all the listeners. Just telling Walt earlier on, just before the show started, that I had an incredibly painful experience that I put a contact in my eye, and there was something underneath it, and it was like having a knife in my eye, gouging it out, and it was extremely painful. So if my one eye looks a bit tired to you, there's a reason for it. But I was just thinking of ways that we can beef things up and be happier and have more energy. And there is... the 3 taps that I do. So you tap on your side here. That is for the kidneys, and the kidneys are the energy to the body. Then you tap here, which is your kidney, which is another kidney point, but this is on the meridian lines. And then your thymus gland, you tap over here. And it really helps. If you're ever in a situation where you need a bit of energy and pick me up, just tap those 3 taps. And it comes from Donna Eden Energy Medicine book, which I did before I did the Jinshin Jitsu, Walt. And it's just amazing. I've never stopped doing those 3 taps, as they call them.
It sounds like a cross between the Jinshin Jitsu and EFT, emotional freedom technique.
Yeah, you could look at it any way you want. I just said it's something Don Eden taught me.
That's good.
And it's really, really, really can help anybody, wake up, or, like you're telling me, you're feeling a little bit of sleep this morning. So those kind of taps. So let's go for it, Walt.
All right. Here. Yeah. And by the way, I am so glad that you successfully came through the contrast with your eyes. I appreciate that. Because, you did. That was the good news. You knew exactly this morning what you did not want. You did not want that feeling in your eye.
I did not want to miss this podcast for you guys.
Didn't want to miss the podcast. That's right.
I didn't want to disappoint Walt.
Oh, I appreciate that so much. And I know our listeners do too. I have to admit, I don't really have much of a topic in mind today, but I thought I'd tell you a little bit about my weekend.
Yeah,
we are in the editing stages now of putting together the first episode of our audio play that Alex King and I have written, and that our wonderful cast members have been recording with us. And we had one little glitch that's going to mean doing a re-recording of part of it this coming Friday, but I did start doing the editing, and I ran into something that, I have run into this kind of thing in the past, and it's always been a little bit of a challenge to me. And this time I was kind of proud of myself, because I didn't get all upset about it for a long period of time. I got upset for about 10 seconds and I said, no, that's not worth it. Basically, I won't go through the whole story, but there's a piece of software that I use to edit this stuff together. And the creator of the software decided that he wasn't going to make everything work properly. And then when I went to try to get the upgrade in order to get the thing to work properly, he decided to charge me more for the product. And that's when I decided to switch products. But the point is that in the past, I would have gotten all upset about that. I mean, it would have ruined my weekend. And I was upset for about half an hour. I'll give it that much, maybe about a half an hour. And I said, this isn't worth it. I mean, I think it's like $65 to get the replacement software. I don't have to deal with that person anymore. I can just get a software from somebody who's a little bit more honest about the way they do this thing, and it's done. It's not a big deal. It's only $65. I mean, come on. This is not something to get all excited about. So I was proud of myself for that. And then on Sunday, Louise and I went to the coast, near where Cape Cod is, and just spent the day, had a nice lunch and walked around town a bit and so forth. And it was just delightful. The weather was perfect, absolutely gorgeous, perfect, low humidity, temps in the mid 70s to low 80s. I mean, it was just gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is the way life should be all the time. I love this. I absolutely love this.
There's nothing more invigorating than days that are just perfect, just spot on, not too windy, not too hot, not too cool, and pleasant views, pleasant environments. And if you're at the ocean, you had that O3, which is hugely beneficial near any big body of water. You've got the O3 molecules.
Absolutely,
so, I can appreciate that. But I wanted to talk about your first experience about that software. And what you're doing is you're living your philosophy. The philosophy now is focus more on what you want and less on what you don't want.
Right.
Shortening the time of those don't want periods of angst and frustration, etc., and moving on to what you want, and then poof, you just feel so much better, as you say. You with a product which you feel more comfortable with maybe somebody who produced it who's a little more ethical in your mind, and So you can feel free and happy, and you didn't languor in the area of toil and trial and annoyance. And
I could have easily stayed there too. I mean, that would not have taken very much for me to stay in that spot for like the rest of the weekend and ruin the trip to the coast and everything. I could have easily done that.
Yeah, but now you're saying I'm not going to give my power to some person who's made a piece of software. I'm going to take it back.
Absolutely.
I'm going to take control of my life, and I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to let what was behind, what happened yesterday, go. Let it go.
And by the way, I'm also going to get a better piece of software, because quite honestly, the new piece I'm getting really is a more stable and better written piece than the old one. Why I was using the old one, I don't know. But I know the new one is better, and I'm getting the better one. So, hey, this is an improvement, no matter how I look at that.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh.
I have sort of a semi-topic, I think. Abraham talks a lot about pivoting. What we often do is we often forget to pivot. And what I was just celebrating, what you were just pointing out, is that I remembered to pivot, right? And I think the topic I want to address is congratulating ourselves when we remember to pivot. We have a tendency to want to criticize ourselves. Oh, geez, why did I stick with that? I should have just pivoted. I should have done something. I should have done one of the processes. I should have done meditation. I should have done, I should have. That's our usual way of doing things as human beings in the human race. So much better when we switch over to congratulating ourselves when we did do it the way we wanted to do it, when we did make the switch, when we did make the pivot. And I just want to say, let's do that more often.
Absolutely. I love Abraham's story. Abram was talking to a lady who was complaining bitterly that she was driving down the highway. And
I've complained bitterly about driving down the highway too, but
give it up, Walt. It's not helping. Good boy. And she got pulled over by the cops and got fined for not wearing her seatbelts.
Oh dear.
She was really having a go at Abram because she says, and I was even listening to your one of your seminars in the car when it happened.
Oh my.
And Esther / Abram smiled, and I asked her. I said, "I've got a question for you. How do you feel about seatbelts?" "Oh, they're terrible. They shouldn't be allowed. They're you should be able to make your own choice." And she went on and on about it. And Abram was smiling and says, "Well, the cops have got a sense. They can just smell these guys that don't have their seatbelts on."
Oh, that's funny.
Sense. And that is the vibrational match. The cop is wanting to find somebody who's doing something wrong, and the person who's doing something wrong is feeling like they really should be allowed to do this wrong thing, and they've got a strong vibration, and the two go, boop, match.
There it is. Perfect match.
Perfect match.
Well, there's a theory in criminology that criminals want to be caught.
Of course. Yeah. My mentor said that to me many, many, many years ago. She said to me, "Louis, no robber is ever caught without them wanting to be caught." And I said, "What? You must be mad. How does that work?" And she couldn't really fully explain it. And I kind of got to the bottom of it with Abram. I didn't really until Abram Hicks pointed out the vibrational aspect to everything. And it blew me away because now I understood what had been sitting in the back of my mind for what, 20, 25 years. I was sitting there chewing this thing over. How does that work? How does that work? How does that work?
How did you get anything else done during the 25-year period? Oh, no, I'm kidding.
To tell you the truth, I don't know how I got it. Understanding questions like that were more important to me than anything else.
I guess, yeah.
But the clarity that Abram brought to the table was, as I've probably said many times, one of the things that the law of attractions really helped me is mentally suffering. It's taken away almost all my mental suffering, and suffer for very short periods of time now. And then I'm focusing. Oh, I realize I'm focusing on what I don't want. Oh, what do I want? And let me think about that. And I don't suffer anymore. So, huge advantage in that sense. Really appreciate that aspect.
One of the words that I like to use is indifference. In other words, I try to be indifferent toward things that I don't want, rather than focusing on I really don't want that. Or, I'm going to try to talk myself out of wanting that. It's more like, no, I just don't really care about that. And now that I don't care, now it doesn't show up anymore because I don't put out any more vibration. When I'm looking at the idea of pivoting, I look at that differently now. When I think of pivoting, I used to think of it in terms of, well, I really don't like it when the cop pulls me over for the traffic infraction. So I've got to pivot over to liking being on the road and the cop ignores me entirely or something like that. No. That's just drawing the cop to you still. You're still in cop mode.
It still doesn't feel good. If any of our listeners are wondering how it works, if it still doesn't feel good, your new thought, you're not heading in the right direction. Yeah.
And, that's part of the trick right there is recognizing that it doesn't feel good. We'll try to talk ourselves into thinking that feels good.
It could have felt a little bit better than your previous statement, though.
It probably did, yeah. But
which means you were heading in the right direction.
It was the right direction, but it wasn't quite there yet. It doesn't feel good until it really, really feels good. We all know what feels good really, really feels like.
Oh, yeah.
It's interesting, too, how often we will argue for it feels a little bit better as if it were feeling good. We want to convince ourselves of it, so we try to convince the world of it.
The biggest mistake humans try to make is trying to get everybody to agree with them.
Yes.
My way is right, boy, and you better take it on board, otherwise I won't believe I'm right.
It's my way or the highway.
Talking about that, Walt, I was pulled over by the cops about 4 years ago. And it was the first time I think I've ever been pulled over by the cops in my entire life in the UK. Yeah, it was. And, I had this big yellow case around my phone, but it wasn't like this one, but it was a huge yellow one. So it was very easy to see, and the cop was behind me. And I got into the car on this call. It was to my accountant. It's very important. So I continued the call in my
I love
car.
that. It was very important.
Put the siren on, pulled me over, and he said to me, "Bring your phone out with you." So I said, "Fine." So he said, were you on the phone? You were driving? I said, "Yes, officer." So he says, "Well, that's dangerous." "Yes, officer." And he went on, and he said, did you see me behind you?" I said, "Well, at some stage, yes." He says, "Well, you didn't see me straight away, did you?" I said, "Probably not, officer." And he went on, and he said, "What do you say?" So I said, "Well, I'm wrong. Find me, do whatever you want. I'm just wrong." And he says, "Well, what do you say?" And and eventually had to put the words in my mouth. He said, "Well, you're not going to do it next time, are you?" I said, "Oh no, of course I'm not going to do it next time." I was just so guilty. I was so prepared, guilty, but he wasn't used to somebody, just saying, "I'm guilty, find me." He just wasn't used to that. It wasn't part of his experience at all. And when he came across me, he just didn't know how to deal with it. And I didn't know how to deal with it either. The first time I ever pulled over almost in my life.
That's funny, though, because he was trying to do exactly what you said. He was trying to get you to say what he wanted you to say without giving you the clue about what it was. He was hinting.
I know he was hinting all over the place, but I was so blind. I'm not very good when it comes to subterfuge.
I can't tell you how many teachers I had in school who used to play the same game, and they'd get really upset if nobody was actually guessing what it was that they were supposed to be saying.
Mm-hmm.
So the class would be throwing out guesses, right? "Well, are you saying this?" "No, no, no, no." "Well, are you saying this?" It's like charades on steroids in front of the entire class. And the best part was when the principal would get in front of the entire school in the auditorium and do the exact same thing. And now you have the entire auditorium shouting out answers to him. Crazy. The games we play, but it illustrates in a very effective way how futile it is to try to play that game. Because we try to play that game thinking it will make us feel better, and it actually just drains us of energy.
Mm.
Right? How much energy does that teacher put in who's trying to get the class to guess what it is that he or she is driving at? And then at the end of the day, I'll bet you that same teacher goes into the teacher's lounge and complains how wiped out they are.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's not just teachers. I don't mean to pick on teachers, by the way. We all do this. Huge numbers, multi-millions of people do this on a regular basis every single day. You can do it at your job. You can do it with your family. You can do it with the cops. You can do it everywhere.
Yeah, it's just interesting that I wasn't a vibrational match to getting a fine, but I obviously had somewhere a vibrational match that I shouldn't be on the phone in the car. Otherwise, I wouldn't get pulled over. Because, I pretty much disobey many driving rules and laws all the time.
Remind me not to drive on the same highway as you, but go ahead.
I would rather drive next to me, but that's another story. But I never ever get caught. I've still got a full clean driving license from the first day in this country to today, which is 23 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And I've never got a single solitary fine. Okay, I've got a parking ticket here or there, but who doesn't? But
I don't. I have never had a parking ticket, not one.
Do you live in the sticks, Walt?
Well, actually, it's odd. I've never had a parking ticket that I can think of. I'm pretty sure I've never had one.
I think it's when you work in town.
Well, actually, that's not true. Not entirely true. Actually, it was my wife who got it. She got a parking ticket for being in a city where she was not in.
Oh.
That was pretty clever.
Those are always delicious.
Yeah, she ended up contacting the state government about it, and they now, of course, take pictures of it, right? And they brought the picture up, and it was not her car, but the license plate was very, very similar, and it was a little distorted, so it looked like it was her license plate.
Right.
So it was a
She managed
mistake.
to convince them she hadn't learned bilocation yet.
Well, she did mention something about her Star Trek transporter being out of alignment, but yeah. No, they didn't give her any hard time at all. They said, "Oh, this happens actually more often than you might think, but no problem. We'll take care of it." And they took care of it. What was interesting, most interesting from a law of attraction perspective, though, is she didn't get all worked up about it. She just called them up. She didn't know what to do at first. I suggested calling them up, so she called them up, and there was no angst, there was no anger, there was no frustration. It's just, okay, I got this thing here. I don't understand why this has happened. Could you please explain it to me? And they said, well, looks like it was a case of mistaken identity. No problem. We'll wipe the record. It was that simple.
Yeah, it's really interesting when you don't have any thoughts for or against a subject, how quickly and easily it can be sorted out. It just
Exactly.
just sorts itself out with no problem whatsoever. And I love those situations. I was, did I tell you, Walt, this famous sauna of ours, they've just brought in a whole new spa section.
Ooh.
Now, my visualization was working well because, I love those kind of things. And the guy took out one of the tennis courts outside and put in a whole beautiful spa.
Oh, my goodness.
We've got a crystal room, a crystal steam room, where he's got an amethyst about that high.
Oh, wow.
6,000 pounds worth of amethyst. And it's got this gorgeous smell and steam coming out. And they've got music in all the saunas and steam rooms. And then you've got the quiet room where you've got like hammock type things where you can just lie down and go to sleep in a quiet room. Then you've got the plunge pool, which is amazing, freezing cold, and exactly as it should be. The showers are strawberry flavored, and the other one's raspberry or something.
I love it.
And you get this little bit of oily sheen on you. So I think it's like essential oils they put in it or something. So you're showering in this. Oh, it's gorgeous. Absolutely. The place is amazing. The guy's done a tremendous job. But I was in the Himalayan salt sauna where they've got these blocks of Himalayan salt all the way up the side, and it's
oh my God,
salt kind of seeps into the air. Gorgeous one. And there was this lady who came in there, and she was talking about how frustrated and down she was. And me and this other guy, I was talking to him earlier, we were chatting to her, and slowly we talked to her about being selfish. And the idea was quite new to her, and she was realizing that she had to start doing more things for herself, and etc. And she was getting rather tearful along the way, as well as she was releasing a lot of the challenges that she'd been going through and picking up the new information. And the other guy left, and then he asked me afterwards. He said, "Hey, was she still crying when you left? Was she sorted?" I said, "What's wrong with crying? I don't see crying as anything negative. I just see it as relief and release." And, he kind of grasped what I was saying and went on board with it as well. But I chatted to her again in that crystal room later, and she was feeling so much better. She'd done a full 360, and she was perked up, and she was telling me she loves the plunge pool as well, and going through the contrast of the hot and cold, and how that's really helping her as well. And, when they built this place, they only opened it last week or the week before. And I've never seen so many smiles on all the club members' faces. It was just incredible. Everybody was beaming from ear to ear. Absolutely amazing.
I don't think I've ever heard of it. I mean, that sounds like something they might have in Los Angeles, but I mean, I've never, ever seen a spa like that. That sounds like an amazing spa.
It's got an outside jacuzzi, which has got all the, lying bed area in the jacuzzi. It's got the outside sauna. So in winter, and it's got an outside fire as well. It's got area and everything. And they're going to serve you food and alcohol and everything there. So it's going to... it's going to progress into a place which I don't know if I want to stay at home anymore.
That sounds truly amazing. I'm not sure if I'm totally into all of that stuff, but I'm just mind blown about the idea that there's a place that has all of that in one
Mm.
place. It's really, I mean, you're right. That guy really went all out to create this new spa effect.
And it's also got two swimming pools, but they were there before. So it's got the big, half Olympic sized swimming pool. And then it's also got the kids one.
Okay.
And then it's still got the old sauna, old jacuzzi, and old steam room. So,
I'm also
yeah.
imagining there might be some tennis players who don't understand how law of attraction works, who are griping that their tennis court has been turned into a spa. But other than that, it sounds really great.
It's a huge club with a lot of courts, so I don't think anybody really missed it.
Nobody knows it. Oh, okay, good.
It was one of those courts that that I think was very rarely used, so they did it that way. And of course, in winter, it's hardly ever used because they don't use the outside courts as much. But,
Besides, it would be, even if it was creating a problem for someone, it's just another opportunity for them to understand and learn how the law of attraction works. They basically have set themselves up on more time. Well, okay, have fun.
It was interesting what this lady was saying, though, Walt. She was saying that, she was left quite a lot of money. And unfortunately, she told her family, and now her family are leeching off her.
Oh.
And I can imagine how horrendous that kind of situation is. And she feels she can't say no, It's just can't say no. So she's paying for this one's mortgage and paying this and doing that. And it's really, it's a tricky situation to get yourself in because you just dig yourself in deeper and deeper, don't you?
Mm.
It just gets like a bottomless pit and you don't know how to get yourself out of it.
Well, clearly it's something that she attracted.
Yeah.
There are many people who talk about, what do they call them? Soul contracts, where you come into life to set yourself up for a certain thing so you can experience it. It almost sounds like one of those situations. She set herself up to attract this money so she can experience people leeching off her, so that she can basically learn how to handle that without feeling like she's getting sucked down. And that sounds like what's happening right now.
Yeah, I'm not so sure about this whole soul contract idea. I'm not sure if I'm completely sold on it.
I can't say I'm completely sold on it. I'm fascinated by it. Certainly, some of my co-hosts are very much into it, very much believing of it. I'm like, maybe. I mean, I can certainly conceive of it being true.
Well, if you put it in a vibrational perspective, you're going to want to have beings who are vibrationally. I'm trying to think of the right word. They're going to rub you up the wrong way. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody rubs me up the wrong way, you know what I immediately see now and think now, Walt?
What's that?
You know what my instant first impression is? If somebody's rubbing me up the wrong way, they're my teacher. What are they going to teach me?
Mm.
That's the first thing that comes to my mind now, nothing else.
That's quite advanced to have gotten to that point where you're always seeing that.
The reason I'm really seeing it and seeing it clearly is because I've been so detached for so long that nobody's really bothered me too much. So when somebody does come in and bother me, I know they're my teacher. Absolutely no doubt. I'm so excited. I'm actually, sitting on hind legs. What am I going to learn? What am I going to learn? What have they got to teach me? And, it's a little bit like Richard Bach and Donald Shimoda, Donald Shimoda needed to get Richard to tell him not to worry so much about what people think about him.
Right.
That was the lesson that came out of it. And, even though Donald Shimoda got really cross about it in the beginning, and that showed that it was definitely a lesson he needed to learn, he moved through it and moved on.
Mm-hmm.
And then got somebody to shoot him. But, there's different ways of dealing with it.
I always was a little bit puzzled by that choice. I figured, okay, there must be some reason for it, but let's just say it wasn't in my top 10.
I know, Walt, you like those stories that end on a pleasant.
I do. I love them.
They're called fairy tales, Walt.
I know they are. That's what it's called by people who don't understand the true meaning of them. But the thing about the soul contract, I'm like you. I'm not totally on board with it, but I can at least conceive of a way in which it could be true. Because, like you say, if you look at things vibrationally, from a vibrational perspective, we do know, Abraham tells us, we come into this world in order to experience the contrast. Well, why not actually decide I want to experience this particular contrast? I can conceive of that. It does kind of strike me as being similar to trying to micromanage the universe about I need to meet that specific person over there rather than a person who meets my list of criteria. But people do that all the time. So why wouldn't they want to necessarily do that before they come here? I mean, I can't rule that out. Yeah, I can see somebody picking that.
But you see, what you can't pick is the path they're going to choose in their life, and their path they're going to choose in their life may be way away from you. So it seems a bit arbitrary to pick somebody who may or may not be there at some stage in your life.
It does. It does.
And what I've come to understand is you're going to attract what you vibrate. So even if they did spin out of your life, you could draw them back by being a vibrational match, understanding what that is for that individual. And mimicking it, but not many people have really understood how to do that yet. And I'm one of them, because I understand the philosophy, but to mimic the vibration where somebody is at completely. If I was completely the same vibration as you, Walt, you know what would happen? I'd become invisible.
That's interesting. Talk about that for a moment.
Well, it's an ability some masters are purported to have, is that they can be in a room, but because they meld with all the different vibrations from the angle that the person can perceive them, they vibrate at the same frequency as that individual, then that nobody can see them. They become invisible. And it is just a vibrational thing. So, as soon as they want that individual to see them, they start not vibrating the same, and they vibrate the contrast, and we can see the contrast quite easily, and that's how we all perceive everything, is through contrast. And once there's the contrast again, then suddenly they miraculously instantly appear in front of them when they actually were there all the time.
It sounds like what they're actually doing is taking advantage of the phenomenon we call resistance. Because most of us, most of the time, when we're trying to attract something, whether consciously or subconsciously, we have also a certain degree of resistance that's involved. And that resistance keeps it from showing up instantaneously. Well, if you have resistance that's involved, then that resistance essentially blocks you from noticing that thing that is what Abraham calls in your vortex. You can't see it. You can't tell it's there, even though it's already shown up. And so we think, well, it hasn't shown up. That's what it sounds like to me that you're describing. You're describing the same phenomenon, just done deliberately rather than through the way LOA works.
Well, I would put it slightly differently, Walt, and I'm not quite sure I fully understood where you were coming from, but I would say that when there is no resistance, you can't perceive anything. When I am exactly the same as you, it's unperceivable. But when there is a resistance, when there is a difference, then you can easily perceive me.
So if I attract something and I attain the same vibration as the thing that I attract and I bring it to myself, that suggests it's always going to disappear.
It's got a lesson, and once you learn the lesson, it disappears. Yeah.
So you think that all of life has lessons? You're part of the Richard Bach School. Everything's about learning lessons and having fun.
Not so much the learning lessons, but definitely the having fun.
I agree with that.
But, as Richard Bach would put, you can't really separate the two. If you're having fun, you're often learning. And if you're learning, you're quite often having fun, but not always. But yeah, one of the two things is generally happening. I would tend to be in that school, yeah.
Okay, all right.
I wouldn't say it's the ultimate goal. I would now, under the perception that was given to me by Abraham Hicks, I would now understand that the goal is to play with the contrast so you can expand the source, the bigger part of you, endlessly. There's no end to that. It's a continual expansion. There's nothing else but expansion for it. So that would be my deeper understanding of the reason for being now.
Well, if the phenomenon you're describing is true, then all there is for us to do is to play with contrast, because there's nothing in it for actually playing with that which is identical vibration, because like you say, it disappears.
It disappears. It wouldn't be there. You wouldn't be able to perceive it. So when you're a vibrational match to something, first of all, you don't have it. It's a thought. And let's say I want a teacher. All right. So I'm not going to bump into too many students because I'm looking for a teacher. But when a teacher is looking for a student, and that's a thought of what they want, and a thought of what I want is a teacher, then the vibrational match is the two of them. Okay.
Okay.
And that is what a vibrational match is. So
Yeah.
both, one is looking to teach, one's looking to learn, and that is the match. It's not that they're both teachers, not that, a teacher probably wouldn't see a teacher if they were teaching exactly the same thing that they were teaching. That's the kind of invisibility.
I'm still concentrating on that one, asking myself, do I think that's true? Do I think that's true? I'm not so sure it's true. I'm not so sure it's true. And the reason I don't think it's true is because of the concept I am. I am is, this is a Neville presentation. Neville Goddard talks about how I am is the first step to every form of manifestation, every type of creation. It's what begins all of it. And it is an affirmation of self-existence, but it's also an affirmation of consciousness and of ability to create and ability to imagine, have that imagination turn into a thing, and so on and so forth. If I start with I am is a form of self-awareness. And the moment that I have self-awareness is the moment that I have in my mind the ability to, quote, see, unquote. And I don't necessarily mean with my eyes. I mean to sense, to be aware, to have that self-awareness. Well, if I can attract something that has the same vibration, what you're saying is the moment that it arrives, I won't have that sense of awareness of it. And I think what happens is when it shows up and comes to me, it kind of like becomes an expanded me, and so my awareness increases.
You see, I think where people struggle with vibration is, and similar vibration is, let's use the teacher-student again. So the student is obviously a very different vibration to a teacher, yes?
At the moment that they're a teacher and student, sure. Yeah.
They're completely different vibrations. So what is the area in between the teacher and student that bonds them? What does that look like?
It's the common topic, the topic that the student's coming to the teacher about.
And the teacher wants to teach a student, yeah.
Presumably. Not always true, I found, but yes, ideally.
Well, let's just talk from a vague vibrational point of view. One wants to teach and one wants to learn. Okay, and inside that vortex, although they're very different, there is a bond of what they want. And it's in that bond that everything happens. Some of the most amazing things in your life will happen when you manifest things. We all know what it's like to, hey, I always wanted that red car. Now I've got it. Yeah, it feels so good. Or like me, I always wanted a teacher. And when I got one, I just felt so good. It was the best thing in my life. And as it matured and changed and grew and all the rest of it, it was an incredible experience. But, I wasn't the teacher. They were the teacher and I was the student. And it was just a beautiful relationship. So, it's something I'm still getting my head around, but I'm starting to put the pieces together to it all. Because when you get what are we talking about here, about that mix in between the master and the student, what a vibrational match looks like, then you can start very consciously achieving one from a very clear vibrational point of view. And then your manifestations just get easier and easier, and that's what we're all like, I think. When you want something and you get it, it'll make you incredibly happy. And when you want something and you don't get it, something is going to make you incredibly unhappy. It's a very simple statement, but incredibly accurate and powerful in my understanding. And, the most satisfaction I've ever got in my life is when I've achieved certain dreams of mine. I mean, I think most people would agree with that. And it's the starting to become clearer and clearer how that manifestation takes place, that you start getting the picture of how you can really carve your life out into any way you want. Walt, the only reason I can't play a violin, there's only one reason.
I don't believe you can.
I don't believe I can. And that's just an amazing statement. And you start realizing there's nothing I can't do on this world. Nothing. I can be.
By the way, I actually proved that to myself one time. No, I do have a musical background. I played piano and guitar and a little bass guitar. And one day I was in that same thought. Now, this is long before I knew about law of attraction. I didn't know any of this stuff. I barely knew anything about Anthony Robbins. I mean, that's how far back it was. And I remember saying to myself, it would have been great if I could have learned how to play the violin, but I never did, and I don't know how to do it. And then I thought about it for a minute, and I said, well, I do understand musical notes. I understand musical theory. I know how the scale works. And I kind of vaguely understand that a violin is like a guitar. It doesn't have frets, but you go higher up on the fretboard, or not the fretboard, but the neck of the violin toward the body, and you're going to get higher notes. You go down toward the peg area, and you'll get lower notes. It's got to be similar to a guitar. Maybe I can play a violin. And I got a hold of a violin, and I started to play it. Now, did I play it great? No, I didn't play it great, but I played it. I could play scales. I could even get a little vibrato out of it. And I was thinking, damn, I guess I can play the guitar. The guitar. I'm going back to the guitar again. Yeah. I can play the violin. How about it? Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And I never picked it up before, and I haven't picked it up since. Because I also discovered something else. I mean, every musical instrument is a little uncomfortable to play. There's always some area of discomfort for any given instrument. With a guitar, it's about developing calluses on the left hand fingertips, because the first few times you're pushing those strings down, it's digging into your fingers like, oh, geez, this is really hurting. But then you develop the calluses and you don't notice it anymore. A piano, it's usually the strain of learning to separate your fingers out by the intervals of the various notes, and learning how to do that on a regular basis. You're building up the muscles in the muscles that connect the fingers to the hand. All of that in the back of the hand, you're really developing that a lot. So there's a certain degree of pain that you go through there, until finally you build that up, and then you don't notice it anymore. With violin, you have this thing tucked under your chin against your collarbone, and you're holding it in place in this awkward position while you're trying to do this. And after about 10 seconds, I was done. I didn't even want to learn to feel good about that one.
Do they tend to play both sides, the violinists, or do they tend to only play on the one?
You really only tend to play one, just because the way a violin is laid out, the lower note, if you're looking at the violin and you're looking at the neck of the violin and you're looking at the front side of it, on the left-hand side are the lower notes, on the right-hand side are the higher notes. And more of the violin is played on the higher notes. Not that you never play the lower notes, you do, but especially early on, you tend to play the higher notes. And it's easier, for whatever reason, to do that when you're not having to reach across the neck. So you always do it with your left hand.
I was thinking of that because you really want to balance the muscles in the body, etc. And I'm always thinking about how
I've never seen a violin like that. It'd be interesting to see if somebody figured out a way to reverse the bridge and reverse the strings and then play it left-handed, so to speak. Yeah.
Because you must be rather kinked in your life, wandering around like this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You walk around like this. Well, how you doing? I'm doing good,
I hope we don't have some violinist phoning in and asking. It's not like that.
Well, of course not. After you're used to it, it doesn't bother you anymore. That's the point. I just didn't want to get to the point where it didn't bother me anymore. I was like, no, I draw the line at that one. I'm not doing that one. The other one, too, is brass instruments, trumpets and trombones and cornets and so forth. Trying to get that first sound is disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting. And once you learn it, then you're trying to get the second sound without actually doing anything else except changing the way your lip is moving. And the subtlety of that was, again, more than I wanted to deal with, so I gave up on it. I never really learned how to play the trumpet or the trombone or any of those. And then there's wind instruments. Oh, that's basically like swallowing your instrument. So I lost interest in that one pretty quickly, too. But again, how much do you really want to do it? That's what it comes down to. If you really want to
Yeah.
do it, you put up with the discomfort for a bit, then the discomfort goes away, and now you're a clarinetist or whatever.
I remember this Tai Chi guy, he was saying, I had this very official Tai Chi school and everything was straight angles and all the rest of it. Then he went to another one where everything was bent and flowing. And he said, but you can be straight even when you're bent. You can have the right and all the rest of it. And he was starting to realize there was a lot more flexibility in the rigidness, I think we often need to learn that as well. You don't have to be that rigid. And the rigidness for us humans is really our previous thoughts.
Yes.
They hold us in place. And, I often say to you, don't ask me what I did in the weekend because I've forgotten, because I really do kind of drop off a lot of the stuff that I've done in the past, unless it's really positive. And then I literally play it over in my mind 3 or 4 times to sink it in so that I can call on it again to milk it.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest I'm kind of like leaving behind now, which is really quite, it's quite interesting because, I've got old friends, school buddies who were the closest buddies ever, but, he turned around one day and said, I'm not going to bother to do this or that and come visit you and do this. And it's like, it was kind of the end of our relationship. And, it really bothered me for years and years and years afterwards. And I look at it now and I think, oh my gosh, he created his own world and his own reality. He had 3 fascinations: Formula One, specifically Ferrari, wine farming, and the stock exchange.
That's quite a diverse group.
And literally nothing else mattered to him. I remember going out with one of my female friends at the time in South Africa, and we sat down, and my friend looked at this female friend of mine and said, how efficient are you? And she says, what are you talking about? He said, how efficient are you? So he was extremely clever, intellectual type guy. And she said, I really don't understand. He said, I'm about 93.2% efficient. And if you ever want to have a great conversation with a female, start with those lines.
Yeah, that'll win a lot of hearts. Oh yeah. But the question I want to ask him is, efficient at what?
Well, he would be able to explain that. He would say, how much time do you waste
on what?
On not getting to where you want to.
None.
And you'd have to explain that to him because he wouldn't agree with that.
He wouldn't understand. So he's an expert in efficiency, but he doesn't understand it. Okay.
So I remember going into his bedroom, and it was more in the student days where he had everything arranged neatly, and the pencil was slightly out of alignment, so he turned it slightly, and then he looked at the others carefully, and then.
I understand what you're talking about. You're talking about OCD.
Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of scenario. Yeah.
I have to admit, I've never been asked how OCD was I. It doesn't come up in most of the comments.
2 different things.
Well, efficiency is the positive way of looking at the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Every subject's 2 subjects. He wouldn't look at it.
Yeah.
But what a fascinating individual. When I was in school with him, he used to carve erasers with a razor blade. New designs for chassis for a Formula One car.
No kidding. Wow.
This guy had studied aeronautic, what do you call those wind tunnel kind of?
Wind tunnels?
Do you know when you design something to be the most efficient it possibly can? That's what he did. Yeah. And he got a job with a Ford assembling company in South Africa. And he used to redesign things. They used to strip them down, redraw them, all the rest of it, and make them more efficient and save the company money. And he was excellent at that. I mean, absolutely brilliant. I remember when he was looking for jobs, he was so confident. He used to walk in, throw his CV on it, and he says, "You've already had a copy of this. I know what I want. Do you know what you want?"
Ooh. Whoa.
Can you imagine walking into an interview and saying that? I just couldn't believe it. I was sitting there going, and I have absolutely no doubt he did that. No doubt.
And it probably worked.
He wasn't posturing. That was exactly what he did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's the ultimate job interview.
The company that took him on really, saved a huge fortune because of him.
I'm sure. Yeah. Well, it just goes to prove. I mean, we kind of made fun of it when I referred to it as OCD, but literally, it all depends on how you look at it. Do you feel good about it, or do you not feel good about it? He felt really, really good about what he did.
But the price he paid was he cut off his parents, he cut off his brother, he cut me off, his best friend, just because I wasn't clear and focused enough, or he wasn't prepared to change his structure or his system to accommodate visiting me when I came back to South Africa to see him.
That's what we do. We pay prices, and we always pay a price because we figure it's worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had to get to the stage of appreciating that about him. That I was actually just an obstacle in his way to getting what he wanted.
Right.
Which is what everybody wants to do, is to get what they want.
It's really true. It's funny too how often. I mean, you talked earlier about how we'll try to talk other people into, thinking or saying what it is we want them to think or say. And in this context that we're talking about right here, it's really amazing how often it happens that people do exactly that, because we get this belief going that if I can just get the other person to think about things and say things the way that I do, then I have a friend. But until I do, that's not a friend. And so we pay a price. The price is, well, until you think the way I want you to think, I can't be happy. It's a pretty heavy price to pay.
It's a very heavy price to pay. And I wouldn't trust or believe anything somebody who was selling that, because they're obviously not believing it enough themselves, because they need my agreement for them to feel better. That's why when I go in the sauna and somebody disagrees with me, I'm usually happier than when they agree with me, because then you can have a discussion and you can start putting different sides and different points of view together, and then you can start creating something that somebody may or may not agree with at the end of the day. But that still doesn't matter, but it starts feeling like they're thinking, and I enjoy that aspect. I enjoy getting people to think about things that they haven't quite thought about before. But again, if they don't, I don't really generally have that problem very much, because the people that do bump into me tend to want to, because of the vibrational match.
That's good.
It's where it is.
When we get into that mode, one example that comes to my mind, one not an example, it's a sort of a subtype of what we're describing, is often called passive aggressive. The idea of a person who doesn't go out of their way to overtly be aggressive towards somebody else, but rather they kind of covertly set things up so that the other person is going to become annoyed or feel attacked or feel something, and make it look like, well, it wasn't me, I didn't do it. I was innocent, even though I did manipulate things behind the curtain to make this.
Sounds like you're talking about relationships.
Well, yeah, obviously it's a big part of relationships. It's a way that somebody who has that kind of passive aggressive tendency will tend to behave with almost everybody that way. So their entire set of relationships is going to be like that. And the interesting thing about that, you mentioned that whenever we're pursuing something, we're doing it because we think it'll make us feel better, because we think it'll make us feel happy. I've never yet met a happy passive aggressive person. It's really interesting. They keep trying to manipulate people, and they do get a charge out of it. You can tell that they get a charge out of it. Yeah. But they're never actually happy. They never demonstrate happiness. It's like, gotta get the next one. Gotta get the next one. Gotta get the next one.
But they must be demonstrating it somewhere, otherwise they wouldn't be alive.
Well, they're demonstrating it on a minor scale every time that they get a little bit of a charge, But they never actually get to joy. They never actually get to happiness. They're always like 25 levels down from there. They're not in pain. They're not in agony. They're not in anger. Well, they might be actually, but they're not. They never get to the higher levels. They just kind of float around those lower levels for endlessly, really.
Well, again, I would never want to talk about somebody else's experience in life without actually walking in their shoes.
True. Yeah. We can't really know what's in their heads. You're right.
And I'm sure that these guys at some stage have had extreme happiness and other things and all the rest of it. But the snippets that you get to perceive of them definitely don't seem to be that way.
No. Yeah. You're right. There must be some point in there. Well, actually, I'm not 100% sure of that. I would think that would at least be possible. But I guess it depends on how often they engage in the behavior.
Don't worry, Walt. They will die and then come back and have another chance of playing.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah. But I guess it's just that anytime I've known somebody like that, well, first of all, I don't know them very long because I don't like to hang out around them, so I tend to move away. But to the degree that I've hung out around somebody like that, it's almost like they want. It's like they prefer to feel not good because feeling not good is good. That's the perception I get from them, and I think that's what drives me away. There's no happy ending in that.
No, I mean, once you become more and more positive, those people simply won't appear in your life. So it's not something I even think about anymore. There was a lady who was saying recently that children are vulnerable. I said, what do you mean children are vulnerable?
Good for them is what my reply is. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, I know. That would have been a great answer. Actually, probably, I wish I could rewind and go back and say that's probably the best answer I conjured up other answers. I said to her, wouldn't a more accurate statement be everybody is vulnerable some of the time? But I think I made a bit of a mistake. I said to her, my children aren't vulnerable, to make it personal, which was a bit conflicting, which wasn't the best answer. Your answer would have been...
Well, even my answer was a little bit problematic because the word vulnerable has multiple meanings. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the fact that people have different perceptions about what vulnerable means. The vulnerable she had in mind, I can almost certainly guess, had something to do with being a victim.
Yes. And one of the teachers that they've got at the moment for the kids is rather brutal, I suppose is a word somebody might use. But again, my daughter has never come across that, but other children have. So, what does that tell you?
What you're touching on is a topic that's big these days, the topic of bullying. That's what that's all about. And it's a very traumatic experience for many people, and for other people, it's not an experience at all.
Exactly.
For exactly the reason you're talking.
I was bullied as a kid many times. Many times. And I think it was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Now there's an unusual phrase. You don't hear that one every day.
It created who you see before you today. I wouldn't be carved into the form that I am now and who I am now without those incredible teachers, those lovely bullies. And I was bullied in ways you have no ideas.
I don't think I had anything anywhere near you had. Mine was very relatively low key compared to what most people experience. But I have experienced bullying, and it took me a long time to kind of come to terms with what happened. But I agree with you. In the long run, when you can look back from the long run perspective, I gained some self-love, and I learned how to place borders and boundaries that I didn't know how to place before. And I became a fuller person just because I wasn't giving energy away that I didn't have to give away.
Yeah. I remember being bullied slightly differently at school once. There was this peer of mine female whose surname was Hogg. So Miss Hogg hugged all the awards for everything. I mean, if there was an award, Miss Hogg got it. Okay, and we kept on teasing her that she hogged all the awards, but never mind. She caught me brawling in the passageway at school with a couple of my friends, and walked past us with the nose like that's a bunch of plebs. And I felt terrible because I had no idea what the word pleb meant.
I was just going to ask, what's a pleb? I don't even know.
Peasant, a low-class peasant.
Oh, is that what it is? Oh, okay. Well, if I'm going to be insulted, I figure I ought to know what the insult means, otherwise it's kind of pointless.
I did look it up afterwards and
Well, you didn't have Google available to you. That's the problem.
It took me a couple of weeks to find the library and get open.
Oh my, that's funny.
You get different kinds of bullying, don't you? But we're up. We're almost finished.
We are. I want to make sure I get the announcements in. Very simply, if you're not yet a subscriber, this is the kind of thing you get. I mean, every single show is different. We're talking about different stuff, different co-hosts, different ways of approaching it, but you get really good stuff every time. So become a subscriber, rather, by going to LOAtoday.net. Yeah, that's right. By going to LOAtoday.net, and it'll walk you right through the process. And then, of course, make sure that you're sharing the fact that you're getting your daily dose of happy so that other people are getting it as well. And by the way, people are sharing, Louis. We know that because numbers continue to grow. We're up at higher levels than we ever were before. So thank you to our listeners for that. And thank you also for your insights. I mean, we learned all kinds of cool things today, including how not to care about being a bully, which is a good thing. Or being bullied, for that matter. We definitely don't want to care about that. We want to let that go as soon as possible.
Imagine how long the bullying will go on if you love it so much.
Endlessly.
There's another way of looking at that, Walt.
Oh, that's what I mean about indifference. When I learned how to become indifferent with those bullies who were, teasing me constantly, and I finally just learned to ignore it and not give it any energy, and it went away. Took a little while, but it went away. And
I mean, I didn't have any problems the last 3 or 4 years of my school, but before that.
And by the way, I can look back now and I can actually see the timeline, so to speak, in which at first I was giving them energy, but I was trying to ignore them. But the energy was still there, and the angst was still there, and the anger was still there. And then over time, I became less and less angry, less and less angst, and I got less and less attention until finally it disappeared entirely. So it was me. All I had to do was just let go of that, and it would have stopped.
Yep. It's lovely that they don't teach us at school, and we can have some more bullying.
And yet we somehow managed to learn anyway. I mean, it's just incredible. So with that lovely thought in mind, thank you very much for the conversation. I really appreciate it. And
likewise, Walt.
Thank you also to our podcast listeners and to a few people who popped in on the live stream, and we appreciate you as well. We'll see you all next time here on LOA Today. Goodbye, everybody.
Carpe diem. Take care.